Earliest memory I have of my father is the smell of sawdust and coffee. He was a carpenter by trade, the kind of man who could look at a broken thing and immediately know how to fix it. On Saturday mornings, he would let me sit on his workbench while he sanded pieces of oak or cherry wood, and I would watch his hands move across the grain with this quiet patience that I have never seen in anyone else since. We were not rich, we were not struggling either. We were exactly what I would call steady. And steady when you are a child feels like the whole world. My mother passed away when I was 7. A car accident on a Tuesday morning, the kind of ordinary Tuesday that gives you no warning at all. I do not remember much of the weeks after. I remember a lot of casseroles appearing at our door. I remember my father sitting at the kitchen table very late at night, the lights off, just sitting there in the dark. And I remember thinking that I needed to be very quiet and very good, because he looked like a man who was barely holding something together, and I did not want to be the thing that broke it. He met my stepmother about 3 years later. Her name was Patricia, and she had 2 kids from her first marriage, a son who was 14 when they started dating, and a daughter who was 11, same age as me. My father introduced her to me on a Sunday afternoon in the park. She brought store-bought cookies and smiled the entire time, and I thought she seemed nice enough. Children want their parents to be happy. I wanted that for my father. I told myself I was glad. They got married the following spring. I think about that wedding sometimes. I was a junior bridesmaid. I wore a pale yellow dress that itched at the collar. My father looked at Patricia the way he used to look at wood he was proud of, quietly, with satisfaction. I held my bouquet and smiled. I did not know yet what was coming. Nobody ever does. For the first few months, things were fine, in the way that new things often are. Surface level careful, everyone performing their best version of themselves. Patricia cooked dinner most nights. She asked about my day. She came to my school play in October and sat next to my father and clapped at the right moments. I was not suspicious. I was 11. I was just trying to fit into the new shape of our family. But small things started showing up, the way small things do. When her son broke a lamp playing around in the living room, it was an accident. When I knocked over a glass of juice reaching for the bread, I was careless. Her daughter could leave her shoes anywhere in the house. I had a designated spot by the back door for mine, and if they were not there, I heard about it. These were small things. I kept telling myself they were small things. What I did not know until I was 17, what my father had never thought to tell me, or maybe had told me and I had been too young to understand, was that my mother had a life insurance policy. It was a substantial one, and because I was the only child and my father was the surviving spouse, a portion of it had been set aside specifically for me. Not a trust fund exactly, but an account my father had opened in both our names, meant to be used for my college education and to give me some kind of foundation when I turned 21. I found out about it by accident. I was a junior in high school, sitting in the hallway outside the kitchen doing homework, and I heard Patricia on the phone. She was not yelling. She was speaking in that low, controlled voice that is somehow more alarming than yelling. She said something about timing, and then she said, "The balance is almost where we need it. Just give me until after the quarter closes." I did not think much of it then. I assumed it was about the business. Patricia and my father had opened a home renovation company together a few years prior. My father's carpentry skills, her organizational mind. It was doing reasonably well, or so I thought. I went back to my homework. I did not connect what I had heard to anything that involved me. It was not until I was sitting in the financial aid office at the state university I had been accepted to, filling out paperwork, that everything started to unravel. The counselor asked about the educational savings account. I told her I was not sure of the exact balance, but that my father had set one up. She pulled up what I had listed, typed something in, and then looked at me with this expression that financial aid counselors must practice. Careful, neutral, not wanting to alarm you, but not able to fully hide what they are seeing. The account had $4,200 in it. I had been told, vaguely, that there was enough to cover most of my first 2 years. I remember the fluorescent lights in that office. I remember the little plastic succulent on the counselor's desk. I remember nodding like what she had said made sense, signing the forms and walking out to my car and sitting in the parking lot for a long time without turning the ignition. I called my father that evening. He sounded tired. He said the account had taken some hits over the years. Expenses, some market fluctuation, some costs related to getting the business off the ground. He said it in the way people say things when they have rehearsed them. I asked him if Patricia had access to the account. He said they had consolidated their finances when they got married, that it was just how things worked, that everything was a family matter now. I did not know how to fight that. I was 18. I did not know what I did not know. I went to college anyway. I took out loans for the first year and worked 20 hours a week at a coffee shop near campus. I told myself it was fine. Plenty of people paid their own way through college. I was not special. I just had to work harder. The summer after freshman year, I came home and discovered my bedroom had been converted into a home office for Patricia. My things had been moved to the basement, not maliciously boxed and labeled, just piled. My yearbooks, the little ceramic things I had made in middle school art class, the framed photo of my mother that had sat on my nightstand since I was 7, just stacked against the basement wall like storage. I stood in the basement for a while. Then I went upstairs and made dinner and didn't say anything, because by then I had learned the particular exhaustion of saying something and having it explained back to me as an overreaction. Sophomore year, I could not get enough hours at the coffee shop to cover rent and my share of utilities in the apartment I was splitting with 2 other girls. I picked up a second job at a grocery store, closing shift, 3 nights a week. I was running on 5 hours of sleep most days. My grades slipped a little. Not catastrophically, but enough that I noticed, and noticing made me work harder, and working harder meant sleeping less. It was a cycle I could feel tightening around me but could not figure out how to step out of. By the spring of my junior year, my roommates had both found other arrangements for the following fall. One moved in with a boyfriend, one transferred schools. The apartment lease was ending in June. I looked at what I had in my bank account and what a new lease would cost, and did the math about 15 different ways trying to make it come out differently. It did not. I could not tell my father. Every time I called home, he sounded stretched thin. The business was hitting a rough patch, he said. Patricia was stressed. Things were complicated. I listened and said the right things and got off the phone and sat with the knowledge that there was no safety net. For 6 weeks that summer, I lived in my car. I want to be honest about what that was like, because I think people imagine it as either more dramatic or less uncomfortable than it actually is. It was not dramatic. It was just relentlessly inconvenient and quietly humiliating in ways that accumulated. I had a gym membership I used to shower. I kept my work clothes in a bag in my back seat and changed in the gym bathroom before my morning shift. I ate a lot of peanut butter crackers and convenience store sandwiches. I parked at night in a well-lit lot near a 24-hour diner because it felt safer than a dark side street. I slept badly. I was always slightly behind on everything. On sleep, on laundry, on feeling like a normal person. I did not tell anyone. Not my coworkers. Not the 2 friends from school I still talk to. I was 21 years old and I was sleeping in my Honda Civic, and I was so ashamed of it that I would go to great lengths to make sure nobody could tell. When my coworker asked if I wanted to grab food after our shift, I said I was tired. When my friend called and asked how my summer was going, I said it was fine, quiet, saving money. The lying was almost worse than the situation itself, because it meant I was completely alone with it. The thing that saved me was a broken taillight. I was parked outside the diner one evening eating a sandwich when there was a knock on my window. I looked up and there was a man I had not seen in almost 4 years. My mother's older brother. My uncle. He had moved to a different state when I was in high school. His work took him there, and then he had stayed. We had exchanged Christmas cards. I had seen him at my grandmother's funeral 2 years prior. We were not estranged, but we were not close either. He was just someone from the part of my life that belonged to before. He recognized my car before he recognized me. He had helped my father pick it out when I turned 16. He said later that he had been walking to his own car, parked 2 spots down, and he saw the Ohio plates and something made him look twice. I rolled down the window. He looked at me, looked at the sandwich in my hand, looked at the bag of clothes visible in my back seat. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "How long?" I tried to deflect. I said I was just taking a break, long shift, didn't feel like driving all the way home yet. He looked at me with the patience of someone who is not going to accept a deflection. "How long have you been sleeping in your car?" I started to say I wasn't, and then I just didn't. I was so tired. Not just from the bad sleep and the double shifts, tired of pretending everything was fine. Tired of being alone with something I had been carrying for so long that I had started to think it was just the weight of living. I told him everything. Right there in the parking lot, through the window of my car. In the kind of halting, embarrassing way that comes out when you finally say something you've been holding in for too long. About the account. About the money. About coming home to find my room gone. About the loans and the 2 jobs and the 6 weeks in the parking lot. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Come on. You're not sleeping out here tonight." I followed him to a hotel nearby. He got me a room and I stood in the shower for a very long time, and then I slept for 11 hours straight. The next morning over breakfast, he asked me specific questions. What was the account? Who had access to it? Did I have any documentation? I had very little, a printout from the financial aid meeting, the vague memory of my father's explanation. But he was thorough in a way I was not expecting. He worked in corporate finance. He knew things about account structures and fiduciary responsibility that I did not even have vocabulary for. He wrote things down on a notepad while I talked. What he uncovered over the following weeks was worse than what I had imagined. And I had imagined something pretty bad. The account my father had set up with my mother's life insurance payout had been significantly drawn down starting about 8 months after my father and Patricia married. Not all at once. Slowly, in increments, the kind of withdrawals that would look like ordinary expenses on a statement if you were not looking closely. Transfers to the renovation business. Transfers to a personal account that was, it turned out, primarily Patricia's. By the time I walked into the financial aid office, what had originally been close to $160,000 had been reduced to $4,200. My uncle did not storm into my father's house. He was methodical. He contacted a financial attorney he had worked with before. They reviewed what documentation existed, traced the transfers, and built a picture that was, there is no softer way to say this, a clear pattern of misappropriation. The account had been set up with explicit intended use. The withdrawals had not matched that use. My father had signed off on them. Whether he had done so fully understanding what was happening, or whether he had been persuaded to, or whether he had simply stopped paying close attention, that question sat between us for a long time, and I am still not entirely sure of the answer. The legal process was not fast. I want to be clear about that because I know these stories sometimes make it sound like justice arrives quickly and cleanly, and it rarely does. It took 8 months. There were letters and counter-letters and one very tense mediation session that I sat through with my hands folded in my lap, watching Patricia across the table explain in a calm voice that the business had been struggling and the funds had been a temporary measure, and that she had always intended to restore them. The attorney asked her what the restoration plan had been. She did not have a clear answer. In the end, the settlement recovered $112,000. Not everything, not the full original amount, but enough. My father did not fight the settlement. I think he was ashamed. We did not speak easily for a while after. I want to be honest about that too. The legal resolution did not resolve everything between us. He had allowed something to happen, whether through negligence or complicity or just the particular blindness that can come over people when they love someone and do not want to see clearly. I do not know how to fully forgive that, and I am not going to pretend I do. What I know is that I am working on it. That some days the grief for the father I thought I had is separate from the grief for the mother I lost, and both of them are real, and I am allowed to hold both. Patricia and my father separated about a year after the settlement. I did not feel the satisfaction I thought I would. I mostly felt tired. What I felt something about was the morning I signed a lease on my apartment. A real lease, with my name on it, for a place that was mine. I walked through the empty rooms for a while before I put anything in them, just looking at the light coming through the windows, thinking about the parking lot and the gym bathroom and the packed backseat and the sandwich. I thought about something my uncle had said to me that first morning over breakfast. He had looked at me across the table and said, "You held yourself together when there was no one helping you hold it. That's not nothing. That's actually everything." I did not know what to do with that then. I wrote it down in my phone later and looked at it sometimes when things felt impossible. I am 28 now. I finished my degree. I have a job I am building something with. I have an apartment with a plant on the windowsill that I have somehow kept alive for 2 years, which feels like proof of something, though I am not entirely sure what. What I want to say? The thing I most want you to take from this is that shame is a very effective prison. I stayed in that parking lot for 6 weeks, partly because of logistics and partly because I was so afraid of what it would mean to let someone see how far things had fallen. And the only reason I got out of it was a broken taillight and a man who knocked on my window and asked the right question and did not accept the deflection. You do not always know who that person is ahead of time. Sometimes it is someone you have not spoken to in years. Sometimes it is someone who is just standing 2 parking spots away at the right moment. What I know is that they cannot help you if you have made yourself invisible, and you cannot make yourself visible if you are not willing at some point to be seen. I was seen. And that changed everything. I have thought a lot about what made my stepmother do what she did. Not because I need an answer to forgive her. I am honestly not sure forgiveness is the point, but because I think understanding the mechanics of it matters. She did not drain that account in one dramatic moment. She did it slowly in small pieces over years, in a way that was easy to explain away at every individual step. That is how most damage actually happens. Not in one big rupture, but in 100 small decisions that each seem defensible on their own. And my father let it happen. Whether he understood the full picture or just stopped looking closely enough to see it, he let it happen. That is the part that took me longest to sit with, because I loved him, and I had built my understanding of safety around him for my entire childhood, realizing that someone you love can fail you, not out of malice but out of weakness. That is its own kind of grief. It does not have a clean name. It just sits there. What I keep coming back to is this. The outcomes in my life did not arrive randomly. The 6 weeks in that parking lot were not bad luck. They were the direct result of years of unchecked behavior by people who assumed there would be no consequences, because for a long time there were none. When my uncle finally looked at the account statements and traced every transfer and sat across from an attorney and said, "This is what happened," consequences arrived. Not because the universe corrected itself on some cosmic schedule, but because a specific person took a specific action and refused to accept the deflection. That is what I want to say about intelligence. Not the kind measured on tests, but the kind that asks the right question and does not let go of it. My uncle could have handed me some cash and told me it would all work out. He could have accepted the explanation that businesses hit rough patches. He did not, because he was paying attention and because he understood that real help is not comfort. It is clarity. He helped me see clearly when I had been too ashamed and too exhausted to see anything at all. The shame piece is what I want to talk about for a moment, because I think it is the most dangerous part of the whole story. I was 21 years old and educated enough to know something was wrong and still could not make myself say it out loud. Shame does that. It convinces you that what you are going through reflects something true about your worth, and that if you hide it long enough, you can outrun it. You cannot. It just gets heavier. What I know now is that integrity, doing the hard, honest thing even when nobody would blame you for looking away, is not just a moral value, it is a practical one. Patricia's lack of it cost her her marriage, her reputation, and a 6-figure settlement. My father's lack of it cost him years of trust with his daughter. My willingness to finally tell the truth in a parking lot at night, through a car window, to a man I had barely spoken to in 4 years. That single act of honesty started the chain of events that changed everything. You build a life out of small choices. The choice to look clearly at what is happening. The choice to ask the hard question and mean it. The choice to say, "I need help," when you have been telling yourself you are fine for so long that you almost believe it. I am still building. Most days, I think I am doing okay.